You know, we're going to be talking about how women can actually help the country grow economically. And I'm being joined on the program by the first Vice President of NECA's Networks of Entrepreneur Women, Mrs. Fayo Williams. Mrs. Williams, good morning and thank you so much for coming in.
Good morning. It's great to be here again.
Well, it's good to have you. But we're going to be talking about empowering women for economic growth. And you know, in the last couple of forums that we've seen happening, whether in Africa or outside of Africa, there have been discussions and sessions that have focused on how women can contribute more to how the economy grows. But before we start this conversation, I actually had a conversation at the just concluded World Economic Forum Africa meeting with Benita Diop. She's AU's special envoy for women, peace and security, and she's also the president of Firms Africa Solidarity.
Yeah.
So let's quickly listen to what the conversation I had with her, and then we'll come back and start our own conversation.
No problem.
When women are on top of the political scene, either it is in the government, for example, head of state women, we have few of them, 3 of them now, who are picking up the pieces of their country. Women who are in finance, we have your minister, Ngozi. You know, when you are the right women at the right place, you can make the change. Now women are saying we want to be, leaders in our business. We want to be in the governance of business as well. We wanted to be not just beneficiary, but we want to lead those businesses. But there is still glass ceiling. When it comes to board, manager, or chair of the board, who do you find? Still that circle of men. So to penetrate it, the women are building alliances, they're doing mentoring, coaching. But one thing that I found, which my country, Senegal, is doing well also, is opening access to finance to the women. And I think that is very key. When you go to the bank and you ask them for loan, in many of the countries, either the rate that is inaccessible to the women, or they ask you for your land title, which sometimes you don't have. I think the private sector have to come in. What I like in the World Economic Forum is a public-private, but even they are bringing, like in Grow Africa. Grow Africa is an initiative of the World Economic Forum, the African Union and NEPAD, to see what are the concrete actions that they can do by bringing private sector to invest, by making sure that our government do the right thing, the policy, because government is good at policy, but also implementing those policy. But private sector, I listened to one of the private sector the other day in Grow Africa, say that in Zambia, we train the women to form themselves into cooperatives. Once they form themselves into cooperatives, now they give them all the entrance, fertilizer. The government give the land, because this is owned by government, but the private sector will come with all the entrance that they need, seeds, fertilizer, etc. And and electrification and others come from the government, water and so on. But at the end of the day, the women were producing. And now the private sector, we say, is a win-win situation. We want to buy it because our industry needs your crops. So those are what I'm seeing in the West, is solutions. We are not just saying, let's put it on paper in a nice way, but let's do it in practical. And I see the win-win. And the farmers.
Well, that was Benita Diop, that's AU Special Envoy for Women, Peace and Security, President, Firms Africa Solidarity. She was speaking with me at the just concluded World Economic Forum on Africa meeting, which was held in Abuja. So, Mrs. Williams, I noticed that, most of what she said you actually agreed with. Let's start with let me just pick up one of the points. She says, in governance of business, women want to not just be beneficiaries, but want to be part of that process. But we've seen that, in recent times, there have actually been alliances that have been formed. They mean well. That's women groups and the rest of it, which is what she also encouraged. They mean well. But then at the end of the day, they do not articulate themselves properly to channel what exactly it is that they want to contribute to this growth that we've been talking about.
Well, firstly, I would like to say that I would like to reach out to the mothers of the Chibok girls. I would like to start with that because anytime we're talking about women and empowerment, we need to know that women sometimes are at risk. Anytime there's a conflict, they're more affected. So my heart goes out to them, and I do pray that with divine intervention, the federal government and the support of the international community will bring our girls back. Having said that, you just spoke now about women's groups and what they're proposing. Do they really put out their programs and their agenda out there? And I would say yes. We've had various groups, for instance, NECA's Network for Entrepreneurial Women spearheaded an initiative about participation at the confab. We raised the red flag then that we saw only about 72 positions out of 492. Eventually, I understand we have about 92 women in 492 delegates. Look at the percentages. We are nowhere near the affirmative action that we have yearned for. And I would like to say that a lot of women's groups came out to support this. We became part of an association of Nigerian business women's networks. And not only did they support the inclusion of more women at the confab, which did not happen, we have gone on to spearhead a study on financial inclusion, and I'm so happy that Ms. Diop, she mentioned that, and how that had gone in Senegal. Because when you talk about access to finance for women, it's not about money. When women are able to access finance to run their micro and small businesses, it has an undeniable linkage to reducing issues like infant mortality, because there's a bit more to help with healthcare costs. You can reduce maternal mortality. You can eradicate poverty, thereby helping us to achieve some of these Millennium Development Goals. Goals 1, 3, 4, and 5 can be better achieved if we can actually support women and empower women. And then you'll have more inclusive growth, more sustainable growth. This is what we're talking about here.
Mrs. Williams, it's agreed that women contribute significantly to economic growth, from what you've said. But then again, there's this argument of misplaced priorities. They mean well. Like I asked the question already, we have alliances, different networks of women coming together to try to put forward deliberate action plans of how they can contribute. But even at that, how many women understand their position in how the economy can grow and how they can contribute to this inclusive growth that we've been talking about?
I believe that more and more women are beginning to understand how the country works. They're beginning to lend a voice to what issues they want to see in terms of development. Honestly, for us, it's a journey that is like just beginning. The men have been at it for longer. For instance, we have very low representation when it comes to elective positions. And recently, the confab is about appointments. And we still ended up with the short end of the stick. So what we're saying is that for the kind of exposure we've had, yes, there'll be a learning curve, but I don't think we should, beat down the women. They know what they want. They want more funds in education, because once you educate a youth, that youth is not going to be restive, and that youth will have better empowerment and capacity to generate employment for himself or herself through entrepreneurship, through getting a white-collar job if the opportunity presents itself. But don't forget, we are releasing 6 million youths into the job market every year, and only about 10% of them are getting into formal employment, and only 1/3 of those are women. So I would like to say that women are not as, women consult, they build bridges, they have a more inclusive kind of decision-making process. It may be slow to evolve now, but the reason Harriet, is because we have not been given that platform, that place to really come out, you know, and lend our voice to national discourse. We're only 6%.
So why don't women get the support? Why is it that they're not given that platform to speak out?
There are a number of reasons, starting with cultural norms and beliefs, that the woman's place is in the kitchen, at home. It's only recently that you have more women in the workforce now, and even when they're in the workforce, sometimes the policies do not really favor them to be able to perform their reproductive responsibilities and function at work. You know, we need to really sit down at the round table and realize that a man has a little bit, you know, a different from a woman. There are certain things we can do to make the woman feel more comfortable to contribute her quota fully. Things like having creches in the workplace, things like looking at maternity benefits and such issues. But that aside, let's look at some of the core issues like this access to finance we're talking about. If you go to some of the financial institutions today, you find out, just like Mrs. Diop said, the barriers are there. So there is barrier on access to finance, and because of that, we have women in low growth areas. Sometimes women spread their businesses and try to grow horizontally. I'm doing a laundry, and then I'm doing some small chops on the side and doing several businesses in a small way, rather than growing vertically and growing to become a force to be reckoned with in terms of a service, you know, like outsourcing janitorial services, getting really big. They don't usually grow vertically, they just grow horizontally and have these small businesses in their ambit. So what we're saying here is things like inheritance. We've had issues with women having title to fixed collateral, and these issues are real. Unless we can begin to find a key to unlock some of these norms, some of these cultural beliefs that have stunted the participation of women economically, that have prevented them from participating politically, and then from that social acceptance that a woman is equal to a man. Even as a mother-in-law one day, Harriet, I see you telling your daughter-in-law, my dear, you give us 4 boys. What is wrong with having a girl child? A girl child is just as capable as contributing to family, you know, as much as a boy.